If you are a Patreon subscriber, then you have access to listen to the bonus episode this month entitled The Tale of the Jinx, in which we chronicle the life and crimes of Robert Durst, the 75-year-old real estate heir who is currently sitting in a California jail awaiting trial for the 2000 murder of his longtime friend, confidant, spokesperson, as well as writer, journalist, and mafia princess Susan Berman. If you would like to listen to this episode, you can gain access to that and all the other bonus content for as little as $1 a month. But don't worry, you don't have to listen to that episode, whether you're a patron or not, to listen to this bonus. Because the fact of the matter is, the cases I'm going to talk about here may or may not be related to anything Robert Durst has done. But it's worth mentioning. And it just so happened that I have one particular listener who has been specifically asking about covering one of the victims whose name happened to pop up while researching Robert Durst. So without further ado, let's get on with this special bonus, The Tale of the Other Possible Victims. 3 names come up when people discuss Robert Durst. Kathy Durst, his wife who went missing on January 31st, 1982. Susan Berman, his friend who was murdered, shot once in the back of the head, execution style, in her home on December 23rd, 2000. And Morris Black, his neighbor, who somehow ended up shot in the head in Robert Durst's kitchen, dismembered, and dumped into Galveston Bay. But as I went through the labyrinth of what is the complex life of Mr. Durst, 3 more names popped up. Lynn Catherine Schultz, Karen Marie Mitchell, and Kristen Deborah Modafferi. I want to talk to you about each of these young women and how their names came up in the conversation. Some of the information I gathered came from Megan Good's website, thecharlieproject.org. Lynn Catherine Schultz went missing 47 years ago on December 10th, 1971, from Middlebury, Vermont. She was 17 years old at the time, 5 foot 5 inches tall, or 1.65 meters, and weighed 115 pounds, or 52.16 kilograms. She was white, with light brown hair and blue eyes, and is described as having severe acne scars. She was wearing a navy blue pullover sweater, a brown nylon ski parka, blue jeans, and hiking boots. At the time she went missing, she is said to have possibly been mildly depressed. She was seen leaving her dorm on campus at Middlebury College. It was the first day of final exams, just before winter break was about to begin. She had stopped in at a local health food store called All the Good Things and purchased some dried prunes. She was seen eating those prunes outside the store at approximately 12:30 p.m. She said she was going to take the bus to New York, but the investigation revealed that the bus had already left and that she missed it. Lynn came back to the college campus and was seen in her dorm. She left her room at approximately 12:55 p.m. and was on her way back with her friends to take a final exam in her English drama class when she told her friends that she forgot her favorite pen and was going to go back to her room to retrieve it. The final exam was scheduled to begin at 1 p.m. She never showed up for the test. At 2:15 p.m., witnesses reported seeing Lynn standing on Court Street, across the street from that health food store again, All the Good Things, at a bus stop where she had been earlier that day. This is the last reported sighting of Lynn, and the last anyone had ever heard from her. All of her important personal effects that she may have needed with her were left behind. Her ID, her checkbook, along with all of her personal belongings. It is possible that she may have had $30 in cash on her. Lynn's disappearance was reported to the Middlebury College campus police 2 days after she was last seen, but Lynn's parents were not notified until a week later, and they reported her missing on December 16, 1971. Sadly, her disappearance was not made public until more than a month and a half later, on January 24, 1972. Why that happened can only be speculated upon, but I'm kind of thinking that perhaps the police did not take her disappearance seriously at the time, which seemed to be a common thing in the 70s, kids running off to join cults or to live like free-range hippies or something like that. It's been reported at the time that authorities thought perhaps that she may have been depressed and self-conscious about the severe acne condition, but believed her to be generally well-adjusted otherwise. Many years later in 2005, maybe rolling back on their 1971 theory, authorities described Lynn as a typical, wholesome, all-American kid off at college who wasn't into the counterculture scene of the time. I do believe that if authorities thought that of Lynn back then when she disappeared, it would have made the news much, much sooner than it did. And Lynn's family does not speak to the media at all about her. And this could explain why, that the family has retreated from speaking about the case. Maybe the police lost the chance of ever solving it 47 years ago because they thought she ran away. It was known that Lynn had talked about the idea of faking her own death and starting a new life prior to her having gone missing, but her friends did not take her musings seriously. She frequently wrote to her family and friends back home, and in those letters she talked about feeling homesick, so much so that she considered withdrawing from school. However, there was no indication that she was planning on dipping out of life or going off the grid, or leaving school before the fall semester was over. She was headed to that final exam, so it was bizarre that she would stray off back to that bus stop. And she was registered for the upcoming spring semester. According to Lynn's family, she did not seem unusually distressed, and she seemed to be taking her classes pretty seriously, especially her English drama class. As a matter of fact, she had perfect attendance and studied really hard for that final exam that she never showed up for. But her family did point out that her academic performance wasn't as solid as it was in high school, but she wasn't failing any of her courses. There had been some potential sightings of Lynn after she disappeared, but none of those could be confirmed. And there were some individuals who made confessions as to being involved in her disappearance, but all of those statements would turn out to be false confessions. There is very little in the way of evidence when it comes to what became of Lynn, but her disappearance is considered to be suspicious, and her family believes that she died shortly after she went missing. They do not believe that she would voluntarily walk away from her life without letting her family know her whereabouts. So what is the connection between Lynn Schultz and Robert Durst? Well, the connection had been made several years before his 2015 arrest after the Jinx documentary aired. You see, Lynn's case was reopened in 1992, 21 years after she disappeared. They did so in order to put her information into the National Database of Missing Persons. And then 20 more years later, in 2012, the Middlebury police received a tip that Robert Durst was actually living and working in the area where Lynn went missing at the time that she went missing. He owned and operated that health food store, All the Good Things, the one that Lynn purchased those prunes from on the day that she vanished. If you have had the opportunity to listen to the Patreon bonus on Robert Durst, then you may remember that I mentioned early in the episode that he and his missing wife, Kathy, ran the health food store just before they moved back to Manhattan to resume working for his family's real estate organization. Middlebury police looked into the connection in 2015 after Durst's arrest, but as far as I could see, from what I found online, as it stands now, this connection, the intersection of these lives, is only a coincidence. Police searched the property where Durst lived in 1971 but found nothing of interest, and Lynn's family continues to refuse to speak to the media about her disappearance and has instructed all of Lynn's friends who knew her back in high school and college to direct all media inquiries to the Middlebury police. And that is where this stands today. If anyone has any information regarding the disappearance of Lynn Catherine Schultz, please contact the investigating agency, the Middlebury Police Department, at area code 802-388-3199. Karen Marie Mitchell, born November 30th, 1980, disappeared 21 years ago on November 25th, 1997, from Eureka, California, when she was 16 years old, just 5 days shy of her 17th birthday. Today, she would be 38 years old. She was 5 foot 5 inches tall, or approximately 1.65 meters tall, and weighed 130 pounds, or 58 kilograms. She was last described as wearing a long-sleeved tan shirt, baggy dark brown corduroy pants, tan leather buckled shoes, small hoop earrings, 3 silver rings, and a silver necklace with a crystal. She was white, with sandy brown hair, blue-green eyes, pierced ears, and her hair was about shoulder length at the time that she vanished. Karen's mother and father divorced soon after her birth, and her mother raised her and her brother on her own in Long Beach, California, a large suburb south of Los Angeles. Karen was a feisty teenager. She was strong-willed, independent, and argumentative. She cared deeply for the environment and the planet. She didn't care to fix herself up. She didn't wear tons of makeup. She was a jeans and t-shirt kind of a girl. Her favorite bands were R.E.M. and the Smashing Pumpkins. And this was not unusual during this time. It was the alternative grunge era of the 90s. But she didn't seem to fit in well in Long Beach. Her mom worked a lot, and the two tended to butt heads. So by either 1994 or 95, her mother's brother and his wife offered to have Karen come stay with them up in Eureka. They lived in the country, lots of dirt roads, lots of trees, a seemingly better fit for a young person like Karen. And she settled in well with her uncle, aunt, and their 3 kids. She did well in school. She was not extremely popular, but she wasn't an outcast. She found a place for herself somewhere in between. You know, the alternative kids. During the fall of 1997, Karen was growing restless of the town, and she was working hard to finish up high school and was interested in applying for college at Humboldt State University with a desire to either study law or politics. On November 25th, 1997, Karen spoke to her mother on the phone just about some college stuff. This was a Tuesday, 2 days before Thanksgiving, and she was on break from school. She had a job at a daycare called the Coastal Family Development Center, so she rode with her aunt who owned a shoe store at the Bayshore Mall. She hung out there for a little while before she headed to walk to her job, which was about a mile away from the mall, and this was at approximately 2:45 p.m. Karen was last seen walking towards West Sonoma Street shortly after that, and from there, she was never seen or heard from again. She had money in her savings that was never touched. She also had a plane ticket to go home to Long Beach for Christmas that was never used. A witness came forward and reported that Karen may have gotten into an unidentified light blue 4-door sedan, perhaps the model years being between 1976 and 1978, and it could have been a Ford Granada, a Mercury Monarch, or a Nissan. The vehicle had California plates, and the word Eureka was printed on the license plate frame. The driver of the vehicle was described as a white male who appeared to be somewhere between 60 and 70 years old, who was balding with either gray or some kind of light blonde-colored hair. The unidentified man may have had green or gray eyes and a relatively large nose that could have been previously broken. He had a small build and wore glasses. This driver was wearing a long-sleeve button-down shirt that was light blue in color. Sketches of both the vehicle and the driver are available to view on the charlieproject.org when you search Karen's profile. That driver had been wanted as a person of interest at the time of Karen's disappearance, or at the very least for questioning as a possible witness. The witness who gave this information stated that the vehicle pulled across Broadway Street and nearly struck him before stopping for a girl who matched Karen's physical description. So how was Robert Durst possibly connected to this particular disappearance? Well, again, if you listen to the Patreon bonus on him, then you know that he maintained an office in Eureka as well as a home nearby. And he had apparently visited Karen's aunt's shoe store several times in March of 1998, only 4 months after Karen vanished. And he kind of resembles the sketch of the person wanted for questioning in her case, the description provided by that witness that was almost struck by the driver of the unidentified blue sedan. Attention that was brought upon Durst when he was arrested in 2015 after the Jinx aired had people wondering what exactly it was he was doing in that remote area of California. And because of Durst's dubious past, they wondered what sorts of untoward things happened while he was in the area, and thus Karen's family, who had been long agonizing over their missing daughter, sister, and niece. Could there be a chance that Durst, a seemingly unassuming, wealthy real estate heir with a reputation for having very bad things happen to people around him, was there a slim chance that he had a hand in Karen's disappearance as well? By the time investigators began looking into the possible connection, there were very, very few people around anymore who would have known or interacted with Durst during the time that he was in and around the area where Karen went missing. And even if they had known Durst way back when, they were probably not going to admit to it. When Durst was arrested in New Orleans in 2015, the Eureka Police Department, only 20 miles from where Durst owned a home in Trinidad, wanted to talk to him about Karen. The chief of police told the media to not get their expectations too high. It was only a potential and slim possibility, not wanting to get hopes up or to cause any false rumors or conjecture. They just needed to look at that angle, and I get it, especially when a case is long cold. They've got to grasp at what they can. Karen's story never made it into the news outside of Northern California, but it deeply affected her community, and nobody was able to ever figure out what in the world happened to her. She just walked away from the mall where her aunt's shoe store was, and then just gone. When Karen's aunt went to pick her up at the daycare after her shift was over, it was then she found out that she never showed up for work. She called Karen's mom first, but Mom hadn't heard from her either. Nobody had. And she was missing. Karen's mom drove up from Southern California to Northern California and would stay in the area for 6 months. Extensive searches, search dogs, a tip line, so many leads, and all of them dead ends. And before they knew it, Karen's time vanished would surpass the time she was in her loved ones' lives. Several people have looked at a possible connection to Durst: private investigators, investigative journalists, even psychics. One writer looking into it put together a very shaky connection between the two, and it is highly speculative, and it really doesn't prove much of anything. But he found that credit card transactions placed Durst in Eureka the same day that Karen was last seen. Karen was also known to have volunteered her free time working at a homeless shelter, and it is thought that Durst may have been there several times as well. And also, the composite sketch of the man in the blue sedan is pointed at as looking a lot like Durst. Beyond that, it seems, after all these years, the case of her disappearance having grown ice cold, it has, much to the vexation of her family, become simply a footnote in the never-ending saga of Robert Durst. Both Trinidad and Eureka are located in Humboldt County, and it is a part of California that is known for its prolific marijuana production, but it is also densely forested, lots of greenery, and also home to wanderers and nomadic types ever since the 60s, including an influx of Vietnam veterans. It is also a place that people like to hide, and this is one of the reasons Durst was attracted to the area. He was a lifelong smoker of marijuana, and he was known to enjoy keeping company with drifters and those who were kind of down and out. It was kind of his thing. In the late 90s, Durst spent a great deal of time in the Northern California area, just about half his time. He leased an office one time and put down on the application that he was a chief botanist for a lumber company for 15 years. And you know that isn't true. And all of the things that Durst liked about Northern California are the same exact things that hampered the search for Karen. It's pretty easy to get lost in a place nicknamed the Lost Coast. There were rumors that Karen had been spotted in transient communities, and even some of her friends from school believe that she ran off. But her mother and her brother really don't think that. Even though they'd like to think she's out there, alive somewhere, just not wanting to be found. It is better than thinking that she's dead. Whatever the case, there has not been one single confirmed sighting of Karen, alive or otherwise. And as far as the link to Robert Durst is concerned, to Karen's family, it's all speculative, but they are grateful for the spark of interest his name has brought to Karen's story. Durst has not been ruled out, and her family simply remain ambivalent about him and about Karen. They want to know, but knowing also means knowing the hard details as well. And that's the limbo that they are perpetually trapped in. If anyone has any information regarding the disappearance of Karen Marie Mitchell, please contact the investigating agency, the Eureka Police Department, at area code 707-441-4300. Kristen Deborah Modafferi was born June 1st, 1979, and disappeared 21 and a half years ago on June 23rd, 1997, from San Francisco, California. She was born in Danbury, Connecticut, was raised in North Carolina, graduated from North Carolina State University, and eventually moved to Oakland, California, to attend the University of California, Berkeley. Today, she would be 39 years old. She was last wearing a Spinelli's t-shirt, which is the name of the coffee house where she was employed, a long-sleeved dark blue plaid flannel shirt, tan pants, and possibly fly London sneakers with laces in the front and behind the heel, and those shoes have an imprint of a fly on each of the soles. She was known to be carrying a green JanSport backpack with black mesh side pockets and 2 books from the local library inside. She was white, with long, dark, straight brown hair, brown eyes, and distinctive dimples on her cheeks. On June 23rd, 1997, it was one day before her summer photography class was scheduled to start at UC Berkeley. That day, she was working at her job as a barista at Spinelli's coffee shop at the shopping center in San Francisco's financial district called the Crocker Galleria. Her shift was over at 3 p.m. However, her coworkers did see her speaking to an unidentified blonde woman on the second floor of the Galleria at approximately 3:45 p.m. Efforts to identify this blonde woman have never panned out. Kristen was last captured on surveillance cameras withdrawing money from her bank account. This would be the last known sighting of Kristen Modafferi ever reported. So what happened to Kristen after she left the Crocker Galleria? One of her co-workers at Spinelli's recalled that Kristen had asked for directions to Baker Beach, relating to a co-worker that she was possibly going to attend a party there that afternoon. Once she left the Galleria, after talking to that blonde woman, nobody knows what happened. Bloodhounds tracked her scent to a bus stop outside the mall, and it was picked up near the end of the bus route. But beyond that, the dogs lost her scent as it went from there along towards the beach. It was never confirmed, nor were investigators able to ever find out if she made it to the party, or even if there was ever a party. They also could not confirm if she ever made it home that day either. She was renting a room in a house that she shared with roommates, and because everyone was so frequently coming and going, Kristen could have shown up at home, and it's likely nobody was there or saw her if she had. Her roommates were 4 young college guys, and they all said that when she didn't show up the evening of June 23rd, they were not overly concerned, as it was their initial thought that she probably crashed at a friend's house. And I completely understand that. I've lived with a number of roommates while in college, and usually everyone is way too busy to keep tabs on everybody, right? It's not unusual to go days without seeing each other. So it wasn't until Kristen's dad, Bob, phoned the house and left a message that one of her roommates called him back to let him know that they had not seen her for 3 days. And what's more, Kristen never showed up for the first day of her photography class that she was super excited about starting. And this was a class that she had paid $925 in tuition for. And she also left behind a $400 paycheck from her job at Spinelli's. When Kristen's dad and mom got the news that she had not been seen for 3 days, they caught the next flight to San Francisco. As soon as they touched down, they headed straight for the Oakland Police Department. But because this was a Friday, and the investigators that would be assigned to look into her case were going home for the weekend, Kristen's case would sit on their desk untouched until Monday, June 30th. According to Kristen's parents, the desk officer that they filed their report with could not be less concerned about their missing daughter, assuming already that she was likely another runaway. And as the weekend slowly ticked by for the Modafferys, costly time slipped away. Oakland police would not lay a finger on Kristen's missing person case until that following Monday. By then, Kristen had been missing for nearly an entire week. Her parents' next course of action was to take a look in Kristen's room. They discovered in her trash can a newspaper, the Bay Guardian. In it, there was a personal ad that had been circled. The ad said, quote, "Friends, female seeking friends to share activities who enjoy music, photography, working out, walks, coffee, or simply the beach, exploring the Bay Area. Interested? Call me." Investigators attempted to locate the name of the individual who placed the ad, but they were unable to do so. The newspaper had a policy of purging the backlog of their records each week, which was routine, so information as to who placed the advertisement was already gone. And it was never really determined if Kristen actually responded to the ad, or if she had circled it as something that she might have been interested in responding to, marked it down, but never did. There was a man who resided less than a mile away from the Crocker Galleria where Kristen worked, who police vigorously investigated for years following Kristen's disappearance, after he called up a local television station and gave them a tip about Kristen's location on July 10, 1997. According to the station manager who took the call, the caller said that 2 women killed Kristen over a love triangle involving 3 women. He apparently had quite an elaborate story, providing the television stations with their names, who they were, and where all of this took place. He even said that Kristen's body had been dumped over the side of a wooden bridge near Point Reyes, California. Police were able to determine that the caller was 36-year-old John Onuma. When he was first brought in for questioning about his phone call, he attempted to deny that it was he who phoned in this tip. He would later admit that he attempted to falsely implicate the 2 women that worked with his girlfriend, Jill Lampo, because he believed that they were working in cahoots to get her fired from her job at the local YMCA, where all 3 of them were employed. He denied ever meeting or knowing Kristen, but police continued to be suspicious of him. According to investigating officers, he just had way too many details. It wasn't just a tip, he had an elaborate story. Police did look into Onuma's background and his apartment. A search of his home, strangely enough, revealed a large amount of blood, but when the DNA was tested, it turned out to be cat blood. So I have no idea what that is all about, and to be honest, I really don't want to know. As for his background, Onuma was a pretty shady guy. They found that he had placed a number of personal ads in the Bay Area publications seeking women in the area. And the coincidence of finding that advertisement in Kristen's trash was not lost on investigators. Several women responded to those advertisements, only to find Onuma attempting to coerce them into sex or attempting to rob them. None of these women reported Onuma's activities out of fear for their safety. Onuma moved back to his native of Hawaii 2 years after Kristen's disappearance in 1999. But this would not be the last Onuma would be heard from. He was actually featured on an episode of America's Most Wanted that same year that he moved to Hawaii, 1999. On it, 3 women spoke about being held captive and tortured by Onuma, and this allegedly included being burned and deprived of sleep. One of the women even described Onuma as a human vampire. Another claimed that he kept her as a sex slave. And a third woman said that she was beaten badly when she tried to flee. One of his alleged victims reported that Onuma told her, quote, "You know I'm going to have to kill you. I can't let you go. Now you know what happened to Kristen Modafferi." In 2017, Onuma was contacted by ABC News, and he expressed remorse for making that phone call to try and implicate his girlfriend's co-workers, stating, quote, "I put the attention on me when I shouldn't have, and I screwed up. I took the focus off the investigation." Onuma, surprisingly, has never been charged with anything, but to this day remains a person of interest in Kristen's case. There is also one more strange connection between Onuma and Kristen. His one-time girlfriend, the one he thought was being conspired against at the YMCA, Jill Lampo. She was never suspected of anything, but she did have her own connection to Kristen, independent of her weird boyfriend. She told investigators looking into Kristen's case that right before she began seeing Onuma, she had just ended a relationship with a gentleman by the name of Matthew Luck, spelled Luque, and it just so happened that Matthew was a good friend of a co-worker of Kristen's at Spinelli's coffee house named Kelly Strathman. But when the investigator attempted to contact Matthew and try to get in touch with Kelly Strathman, Matthew was not interested in speaking to anyone about it, and he grew hostile and asked to never be called again. Matthew did go on to work at Spinelli's as well, but that was some time after Kristen vanished. In 2015, some 18 years after Kristen went missing, independent investigators returned to the home where Kristen was living at the time she vanished. A search was conducted, and the search included the use of a cadaver dog that had an apparent world-class reputation for its ability to alert for human remains. The dog, a 3-legged black lab named Buster, with his apparent world-class sense of smell, was actually pivotal in locating long-lost remains of World War II soldiers who had gone missing in action. When he was released on the property, the dog let out a bark every time he sniffed a vent, and eventually he did signal the presence of human remains in the basement of the home. The dog's handler and former Mammoth Lake, California Police Sergeant Paul Dosty advised the Oakland Police Department that an excavation of a concrete slab in the basement would be in order, a slab which he described as, quote-unquote, poorly finished. He also suggested that they re-interview each of Kristen's roommates that she was living with at the time. In February of 2017, forensic pathologist Dr. Arpad Vass from the University of Tennessee also visited Kristen's former residence. He scanned the area with a proprietary device that he had developed that was able to detect human decomposition chemicals. A chemical signature indicating human blood was found near a concrete slab near the porch steps attached to the house next door to Kristen's former residence. And it also pinpointed markers in the area between the two homes. Based on what was found, these searches were indicative of a crime scene, not a burial location. The floor in the basement is very hard and packed with clay, and it would be very difficult to dig through. DNA testing on the decomposing materials on the porch steps of the house next door matched the DNA of Kristen's parents, as they had given samples for testing. The Oakland Police Department's information officer said that these findings need to be confirmed by the city's experts, and said that the information claimed to have been found by these private searches had not been turned over to them, stating, quote, "At this time, the information we need to collect samples for this human decomposition testing has not been forwarded to the department. Additionally, no information regarding the more recent blood testing conducted on the porch has been disclosed to the department, but both independent investigators claim that this is untrue, and the Oakland police have more than enough data and information to conduct their own tests," stating, quote, "All the Oakland PD needs to do is bring their own dogs out to the properties themselves in order to come up with their own data and results, as every university and crime lab in the world has the equipment to do so." And the house next door? Well, apparently the Oakland PD failed to investigate it at the time, as it was in fact a halfway house, home to numerous convicted felons and drug offenders. Since those independent investigations turned up evidence in the basement and on the next door porch, the potential lead seems to not have grabbed the attention of the Oakland PD, as no further progress has been made since then. And so, what about Robert Durst again? Investigators did look to Robert Durst as potentially being involved in Kristen's case by virtue of geography. He was in the area at the time Kristen vanished, which was only 5 months before Karen's disappearance from the same general area. Police looking into both disappearances back in 2003 took a look at Durst, as he was on trial at the time for Morris Black's murder, but they did not seem to go anywhere with that lead. So, Durst's most recent arrest in 2015 definitely revived interest in his possible connection to both Karen and Kristen's disappearances. To Kristen's family, just his presence in the area raises red flags, and it is their hope that if Durst continues to be investigated, that he might have some information that could potentially lead to the truth about Kristen's whereabouts. They have never lost hope, and that they know that the answers are out there somewhere. And if Durst is a possibility, They intend to continue to chase that lead down. But shortly after Durst's arrest in 2015, the Oakland Police Department announced that they have no evidence that links Robert Durst to Kristen's disappearance, stating, quote, "The Oakland Police Department conducted an investigation with the assistance of the FBI regarding the 1997 disappearance of Kristen Modafferi. The investigation was open and active for several years. At this time, we do not have any evidence that indicates Robert Durst was involved in her disappearance. He has not been ruled out in Karen's disappearance, however. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Kristen Modafferi, please contact the investigating agency, the Oakland Police Department, at area code 510-238-3641. As bizarre and dangerous a person I believe Robert Durst to be, I do find his connections to the disappearances of Lynn, Karen, and Kristen to be coincidental, though I do understand the need to investigate all potential leads. Durst does seem to leave a trail of sadness and death in his wake everywhere he goes. But I don't know, dreamers. He strikes me as the kind of person who, assuming he's guilty of his wife's disappearance and Susan's murder and Morris Black's death, he seems to kill people he knows, people who know too much about him. He doesn't strike me as the type to kidnap and kill college girls. I honestly think there would be more victims if he was. What do you think? Let me know. Thank you for listening to this bonus episode, The Tale of Other Possible Victims. And for the month of January, for all new and current patron donations, California Dreaming will donate a portion of your contributions to the Charlie Project, which is operated completely on a donation basis by Megan Good. And many of you are familiar with her and her project. I gleaned a good amount of information from her site for this episode. If you would like to hear the full episode on the life of Robert Durst, it is available now exclusively on California Dreaming's Patreon, and you can gain access for as little as $1 a month. And my dreamers, as always, until next time, sweet dreams.